Hey, good evening and welcome to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you once again from the gun store here in Las Vegas. This show is all about guns, politics, and related self-defense issues. Lots of that stuff in the news at the moment. We are live on KDWN 720 Talk Radio. If you're listening on the radio, you know that already. And we are simultaneously broadcasting on YouTube. If you'd like to watch the show as well as listen to it, you may go to your computer, iPad, whatever electronic device you have, go to YouTube and Fire It Up with Bob Irwin, and you will catch the live feed that is going on at the same time we're talking. There's a few seconds delay between the radio broadcast and the broadcast on YouTube, basically caused by the fact that YouTube is faster, because we've got a 20-second delay on the audio portion on the radio on KDON. So because of that, we can't actually take live calls at the moment till we get some different arrangement between YouTube and KDON. So if you have a question or comment, you may send it in as an email or text an email to the address right here in front of me, and I leave it up there so I don't have to say it every 10 minutes after each story. You can send us a text with a question or comment. The ones that are appropriate, the questions for general viewers, we will answer on the air. That's coming up shortly from last week. All of your texts will be answered. If you have a question about a law or something, or gunsmithing, or whatever it may be to do with guns and self-defense, we will either have our gunsmith respond to it or one of our attorneys who appears on the show. While I'm saying that, we always have an attorney on board to address the legal issues that come up, and a lot of this, of course, as shooters know, is now legal issues. Tonight, it's one of my regular Fired Up attorneys, defense lawyer Andrea Lee Lumen. I said it wrong again. Loom. Okay. We call her Andy, so I'm better with Andy than the long name.
That's
welcome
right.
to the show, dear.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
She's a lot better looking than Mike Giles anyway, so that's the reason. Andy, can you give a little bit of your background in criminal defense work and what you've been doing so far?
Sure, yeah. I've been practicing criminal defense for the past 15 years in Colorado and here in Nevada for 10 years. The last 10 or so years, primarily my focus has been on homicide cases, self-defense cases, things of that nature. So I'm in private practice now. I have kind of a broad practice, but still focus a lot on the homicide and violent type crimes.
The serious defense stuff. If you wish to contact her about a case you have, rather than sending me a text that says, what do I do? I just was accused of murder. You can contact her office. The information is on our website, firedupwithbobirwin.com. You will find a list of the several regular attorneys that appear here. They are all well-versed in this type of case. That's why they're on the show. So you won't be talking to a real estate lawyer who's trying his first assault with a deadly weapon case. You can get a hold of her at her office there, and the numbers are there, and the contact information and the website and everything, I believe, now is on there. First up, as usual, we are going to answer a couple of the listeners' questions from last week's show. The bulk of the questions related to why I can't get my concealed carry permit. What are the rules? I turned it in. They wouldn't let me have it for this and that. There were 5 or 6 of those emails, all in generally the same area. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, about what the rules are to obtain a concealed carry permit. When you take you're required to take a training class, which we do here, as everybody knows, on Mondays and Wednesdays and Saturdays. It's an all-day class. Then there's a written test and a firing qualification. It's an easy qualification. Blind people have passed it, literally. Don't worry about it. After that's done, you take your application down, and you can turn it into the Metro PD. If you live in Clark County, Nevada, if you live in Pahrump, you can turn in 9 county sheriffs and so forth to the local jurisdiction, the local county. The common reasons why they are declined. We are a shall issue state. It says if you have a clean criminal history, you get the permit. First, anything in your history that declines you from the ability to possess firearms. Obviously, if you can't legally own a gun, you're a convicted felon, you beat your wife, whatever the situation is that you became a convicted person, so you're barred from possessing firearms. You obviously can't get a concealed carry permit because you can't have a gun. So what's the point of issuing you a permit to carry something it's illegal for you to own? So that's the end of that. If you have a case that prevents you from doing that, or they turn you down for that, there's ways to go through the state of Nevada and ask them what happened and why they turned you down if you're convinced you should have passed the background check. But anyway, that's handled by the police department. If you can't call us and say, why did they turn me down? They won't tell us. It's private law enforcement information. But you can contact the state criminal history repository on your application. The contact information is there, and find out why they turned you down. Sometimes they can be argued and you still get your permit. The biggest one for people being turned down is you're a fugitive from justice. You may not think you're a fugitive, but that covers a lot of territory. When you moved here from New York and you had a traffic ticket and you decided, well, I'm moving to Nevada and they're not going to chase me anyway, and they're not going to come across state lines to arrest you for a traffic citation or a failure to appear ticket, which is what it would become. However, because you are a fugitive, technically, if you went back to New York, you'd be arrested. You can't buy a gun. You can't have a permit if you're a fugitive from justice. So if they turn up one of those that you forgot to pay or forgot it existed or just did it on purpose because they're not going to come across state lines to get you, you're going to have to contact the court that convicted you, pay the fine, apologize to the judge. You usually have to hire an attorney in the jurisdiction that the ticket is in to do that for you, because it involves multiple court appearances. And then they will recall the case, they'll collect the fine, they'll dismiss the case or whatever, and then you're not a fugitive, and then you can get your permit. So if you're a fugitive, no permit. A DUI conviction within the previous 5 years, driving under the influence, driving while intoxicated, whatever they happen to call it, anywhere, not just Nevada. If you have a DUI within 5 years, the state of Nevada believes that you're not capable of handling yourself in an adult manner. You shouldn't be drinking and driving, obviously, so they don't want you carrying a gun around if you're not so responsible that you drink and drive. So there's a 5-year suspension on that from the time of conviction. Sometimes it's a year before you get convicted when you get the arrest. When the conviction, unless there's a conviction, you're not prohibited. So from the date of the conviction, the 5 years starts running. Metro, again, CCW detail can tell you when that is. The other problem more commonly is a violent misdemeanor. It says in the state law, if you've committed or convicted again of one of those within the previous 3 years. A violent misdemeanor is kind of in the eye of the beholder. Any crime that involves physical violence and you're convicted of it, it doesn't mean you're a felon. You're talking about misdemeanors here. But if you have one of those in the last 3 years, again, you're stuck for 3 years, unless you go back to the court that did the conviction, have an attorney reopen the case, say you've been an exemplary citizen or whatever, and get the judge to dismiss the original charge. Then you're free. Probably more expensive than waiting another year to get your permit, but that can be done, obviously.
Sometimes it can, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a big deal to do. But anyway, if you're a fugitive, got a DUI in the 5 years, violent misdemeanor of any type, you have to wait the time. If your violent misdemeanor is domestic violent misdemeanor, you're under no gun permit at all and no possession of firearms. As we all know, that's federal law. It was just also written into the state law by the last legislature. It just went into effect, or it goes into effect in October, I guess. Mm-hmm. That if you have a violent or a domestic violence conviction, you can't have a gun. That's already federal law, so that really had no bearing on what's happening. You already couldn't have a gun. Now you got the state also telling you can't have a gun. It just means that the locals can arrest you for that as well as the FBI or so forth. Not a big deal. You can't do anything about it. Once you're on that prohibited list federally, you're pretty much sunk.
I have a question.
Yeah. It's
If you have a domestic violence conviction, a misdemeanor domestic violence conviction, and you wait the statutory period and you petition the courts to have your record sealed, theoretically, Metro goes into scope and deletes it.
yes.
So does that now requalify you
No, because it's still going to show in the federal system.
in the NCIC?
We believe. Yeah, it's still going to show there.
What if you have the NCIC sealed?
Well, that requires a presidential pardon.
Even on a misdemeanor?
Yes. Domestic violence, federal law. I personally have a problem with some of those, and I know, no politician will say, well, they had domestic violence, let's give them a gun. The problem is what the domestic violence was, how violent it was, and because, and you've seen this, Andy, if there's a fight and the couple push each other, the police come in and whoever was the initial pusher, not the pushee, gets charged with domestic violence and they take him to jail, especially if it's a new cop, not an experienced guy who's seen this 100 times before. Mm-hmm. They know what's going to happen. When I was working as a bailiff, we had a case that basically drove me crazy. The bailiff isn't allowed to shout out legal advice, nor is the judge. But this kid came in and he had been charged with domestic violence. And the judge said, do you want to plead guilty or not guilty? And he said, well, what really happened was, and the judge said, I can't listen to your explanation. You first have to plead. That's the law. Perhaps you would want to get legal. No, I just want to get this over with. When the judge says, perhaps you need a lawyer, that's a clue. Yeah, but he didn't get the clue. That's about as far as a judge can go. He can't explain the law to you. Anyway, the kid then decided to plead guilty. And then he said, my wife and I were arguing and I pushed her and she pushed me and we shoved back and forth and the neighbor called the police because they heard us yelling at each other. There was really no violent acts. Nobody got knocked down. The police came. I explained what happened and he explained he was the initial aggressor, but now they're going to counseling. They get along fine. It's not a problem. All this is taken care of and they're getting along perfectly. And here we are. They're walking off in the field of flowers and everything's wonderful. And the judge said, okay, in view of that, I will sentence you to the minimums allowed by law, which is at that time a year's domestic violence counseling once a week. Go an hour a week, go to a counselor. Now I think it's 6 months, but it was a year, I think, at the time. Anyway, you get required counseling. You get $100 minimum fine and so on and so on. And the guy said, okay, fine. And then he came walking over to me. I'm writing him a note, which we would normally do, where you go to get the counseling and this and that and the other thing, a little form. And he says to me, when the police were at the house, we had a shotgun behind the front door. And we keep there for house defense. And when the police were there, they took the shotgun. And they impounded it at the police department in Boulder City. And I said, yeah, they do that. If you go to jail, sometimes you get out of jail and you're really mad when you get home, or she's waiting for you because she's really mad, So they just take the gun out of the scenario. He said, well, yeah, okay, well, it's all cleared up now. Who do I see to go pick up my gun? And I said, Congress. And he said, huh? And I said, I just watched you plead guilty to domestic violence. You are prohibited under federal law to have a gun in your possession. And he said, but wait, I go hunting with my dad every fall in Utah, and I shoot on the pistol team here at the Boulder City amateur pistol shooting club, whatever it was. And I said, you can go talk to a lawyer, and I'm not giving you legal advice, but you're out of guns, bud. And you need a lawyer when you go to court. And on a stupid thing like that, not that domestic violence is stupid, that particular domestic violence was stupid. The attorney will come up to the judge and say, Your Honor, if my client does the classes, pays the fine, and he stays clean of this for 6 months or a year, whatever, and I come back and everything is done and clean and nice, will you dismiss the case? And the judge will say, yes. So then you do all this penance stuff and you get to keep your guns because the case is dropped and it's not a conviction. Once you say, I did it.
Yeah. Well, that's called a submittal in Nevada. So remember that.
Don't call Andy and say, help. I've got to mention here also that at 7 o'clock when the radio broadcast ends that we're working on now, we're going to extend the show. We're now extending the show a little bit, probably another 35 or 40 minutes. We are showing on YouTube, as I mentioned earlier. You go to the YouTube channel on whatever device you've got and punch in Fired Up with Bob Irwin, and you will get the show that you're listening to if you're on the radio live and be able to see everything that's going on here, including there's a tape in there of last week's show, which was an absolute disaster with things breaking and whatever. It's fairly hysterical. You know it's actually live when you see what's on that tape. But tonight at 7 o'clock, when we finish the show, we're going to bring in Phil Ramos, retired homicide detective from LVMPD, and talk about the issues that are currently going on with police departments in some major cities where their crime rate has gone through the roof because the officers have quit being aggressive, and enforcement, I guess, is the only way to say it. They're so afraid of getting sued, their department suspending them, ending up in a federal trial, that they're just walking on eggs to enforce the law, and the crime rates in those particular cities, Baltimore and Missouri and so forth, usually where we've had the issues, are going through the roof, and what can possibly be done about that. That's Phil Ramos at 7 o'clock, or just a few minutes after 7. Now, I have to tell everybody that, as we normally do, there are about 200 defensive uses of firearms every day in the United States. Most of them comprise only pointing the gun or alluding to the fact you have a gun and the bad guy runs away. It is not an unusual thing. The press makes tremendous yardage out of the few that are wrongful shootings, and we have those, certainly, without realizing the depth of the use of firearms to make people safe. That's the whole point of this show. So we're going to go over a couple of those, and I want to get, that's why Andrea is here, to get her views on these. Three of them. Normally it takes about the first 20 minutes of the show, which I've already run. We're going to be doing this for about 20 minutes, and then talk about some legal issues also that have come up this week. This is a story from the Bangor Daily News in Dover, Foxcroft, Maine. The man is suspected of killing his ex-girlfriend on the 5th of June. Was unarmed when he climbed through the window of her house, but took the handgun that she had from her and shot her with it, according to the local police reports. What happened here is, this is her ex-boyfriend. They've been bad blood, whatever. He shows up at the house at something near Odark 30, as I recall. The ex-boyfriend is 38 years old. He then has threatened her. He starts into the house. There's a fight as he's climbing through the window. The would-be victim, the lady in the house, got her handgun and pointed it at him. He grabbed her. They fight over the gun. He got the gun away from her, and then he shot her and killed her. the details of all this has not been released by the investigators. This just happened. Asked on Friday if he would share more details with the case. The sheriff said he'd been told by the Maine Attorney General's office not to comment on the case. This is the second issue in this case. The Deputy Attorney General said she would not confirm or deny the accuracy of what he said. We have spoken to the sheriff and told him he should not have said what he and done what he did and said what he said. The sheriff had said in an interview with the press that they believe the suspect was hiding out in camps and in the woods around the immediate area. They were hoping he will make a mistake and they'll catch him and so forth. But he believes the suspect is out there. He's a murderer. They know who did it. Not only do they know from the evidence in the house, but they also have a video of him breaking into an unoccupied cabin that was taken by at a convenience store or something. It had a camera that covered that, and they got a clear shot of his face. They know he's in the area. They know he's armed. Obviously, he's got the woman's gun. So the sheriff put out that information to the local area to tell people, you know, make sure your house is locked up and check your alarms. And if you've got guns in your house, go get them out of your cabin and take them home. Lock your boats up and so forth and so on. He's trying to warn the general public that this murderer is out there. And the AG's office, the AG lady, is saying that he's giving out information that's going to hurt them being able to catch him. And the sheriff's position is, I'm worried about the people out there that are going to get murdered or shot at or whatever. They need to know this guy's dangerous and he's out there. And she says, well, I'm telling you, don't say anything, or, you know, you're in trouble. It seems fairly obviously the sheriff is the one that's got his head screwed on straight here. He's worried about the guy. He's 5'11", 180 pounds, brown hair, so on. Anyway, they had a picture of him. He's got a, if you happen to live in the area and they haven't caught the guy yet, he's got a shamrock tattooed on his left hand and the word outlaw on his right hand. Obviously, a good citizen. And I'm not making this up. The AG announced that they have a $3,300 reward being offered for information leading to his arrest. He murdered a lady, and they put up $3,300 to turn him in. I thought I was reading a 1920s story here. This just happened. Lots of issues in this case. A very low reward for a murder suspect. Obviously, having a gun and not being trained or practicing in how to use it, the gun doesn't really do any good. We get that with customers here. The person, and you all know somebody out there who owns a gun and doesn't have the first clue to how to work it, and they think the gun is making them safe, and it's not. You've got to practice. This is an isolated area. Had she been able to call the police right then, they wouldn't have got there for 15, 20 minutes. And not because the police are particularly slow, but you have to understand the system. They get the call. If they haven't got a unit right there, they're not going to arrive when you pick up the phone and go 911. The guy isn't going to be at the door. So I wrote in my notes here, one of the solutions might be at least to have one of those medical alert things that you can push, and they'll send first responders. And reality is, in a case like this, they'll get there in time to mop up the blood while it's still wet. So it'll be
Well, it does
easy.
sound like she got a shot off, though. She shot him. But
she did get a shot off and
shoot him enough.
didn't shoot him seriously. No, they said in the video he was limping. He got shot in the leg apparently. Yeah. And that slowed him up, and they're worried that, you know, he's going to get somebody's boat and sail off into someplace else and disappear. And I don't know that they have not caught him yet. I didn't see any follow-up on him. But if you're in an isolated area living by yourself, the woman is there by herself, got an ex-boyfriend out there somewhere that's violent, you may want to get a little more familiar with your gun or live somewhere else till they get him. This is...
I had a client once Bob, that was in a similar situation. She was in a sort of an abusive relationship, and she had a concealed carry permit. She was very proficient at using her gun. She had two small boys. She took them and had them learn how to use the gun. And sadly, one day he came at her and she had to use it. She shot him one time, right in the chest, dropped him, and followed everything exactly to a T.
And you defended her.
I defended her, but the DA's office still prosecuted her for murder, believe it or not. So it happens.
They do that. Again, prosecutors look at these things a little bit differently. They've got a dead body on the floor and no witnesses. They want to have the judge say, or the jury say, not guilty. And we may address it a little more with Phil Ramos when he comes in, because I know he's run into that numerous times. If you have a gun, practice, know how to use it, know how to work it, practice in the dark. You have to reload your gun. Unusual in gunfights, but once in a while it happens. You're not going to be able to look at the gun while you're doing it. It's probably going to be in the middle of the night. So if you buy a gun here, we'll give you some dummy cartridges to practice with. And you can practice loading it and unloading it when you can't see. Because probably you won't be able to. Maybe it'll be the blood running down your face, or it'll be just dark out. But the gun is there for a fight, so be ready to use it in a fight, right? Which means not losing the gun and using it for its intended purpose. I always want to do a story about, we should be coming up on a break here in a little bit. We're in communication with KDON. We're not going to actually have a break on the YouTube thing, but we will have a break on KDON in a minute. I labeled this in my outline the Texas story of the week, because Texas has its own gun laws. They shoot at all sorts of people you wouldn't be able to shoot at if you were a regular person in some other state. But this is in Harris County, Houston. They say that their Harris County sheriffs reported at 4 a.m. a homeowner reported his burglar alarm sounded. They were trying to break into his son's window. And, we're going to go to break now? Okay, we'll follow this up. We will run the story, the rest of it. When we get back, there's going to be some news on KDON, and we'll be right back. Those of you on YouTube, we're still here. Phil Ramos has come in. Hi, Phil. What's up? This is the part of the show the radio guys don't get. Have you, just while we're on that subject, have you seen those where the lady or the victim of whatever has a gun, but doesn't work because they just don't know how to work it?
Yeah, because they go get it, they buy it, they put it away, and it gathers dust, and then when they need it, they got to blow the dust off the sites. But yeah, and I know you do it. I do it. Tell everybody. Hello. You're going to buy a gun. Practice till you can do it with your eyes closed.
Absolutely. I have a concealed carry permit. I have a gun, but I don't feel comfortable carrying it because I don't think have a coordinated under those kind of circumstances I would be able to be competent, So I just go to the range or practice and until I get to the point where I can feel comfortable with it. I think
that you can work it in.
I'm not going to
stress,
right?
Under
those kind of conditions.
I feel terrible when I see those kinds of cases, but this is not the first one.
Yeah.
We sold a lady a taser once years ago, and it's all sealed in that clam pack thing that you can't open without a crowbar or whatever. She put it in her car. Never read the directions. Never opened the box.
Oh, geez.
There's a disc you got to put in your computer to code your taser so they can run your background check before they turn it on for you from the factory with the secret code. It was still in her car, and she's trying to rip it open when a guy attacked her out at Lake Mead. Yeah, I can. And ultimately, she was murdered.
Oh my gosh!
But she bought the taser, and I mean, we try to be really specific with that. I don't know if she just decided to open the box when she got home, but I'm sure we told her. And it says on the clamp, this will not work until you follow the directions inside, but who reads that? I got a taser. You know, then she thought she'd just rip it open and zap the guy. And
you know, I mean, it's going to get to the point where you're going to have to, just like on your CCWs, you have to actually fire a gun before you get a CCW. They should enact that.
Yeah, with the tasers.
well, that's,
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have a
they
taser,
have that in some states, you know, and when Utah quit doing that, it's when we quit honoring their permits because
I don't know how strong the tasers are that you can buy over the counter, but the ones that we use, you know, we've had some people paper lock over it.
Yeah.
They had other stuff on board, and they were loaded up with meth or cocaine, and the taser was just a coup de grace.
All right.
You know, cops have no way of knowing that, but you introduce that kind of voltage
they're the same voltage, but they're actually better in another. The strings are shorter; they're only 15 feet. But the good part is the civilian ones. When you hit it, you can drop the taser and run, and it continues running for like 15 seconds. You don't have to stand there and hold a button. You can shoot it when the darts hit him and it starts running. You can just leave it, and he's there while you're running away.
Can anybody buy a taser? I don't know this.
18. That's
Oh,
all.
okay.
You know, in Nevada law.
Radio's coming back. Okay. Go.
We are back here on Fired Up. If you're not watching on YouTube, you missed a good conversation. Sometimes when we're on the radio, the best part happens when we're off the air. As I started to say, this is a case in Houston where a guy was breaking into a house at 4 a.m. The guy was breaking his son's window. He managed to reach through and get one of the locks undone. So he's coming through the window. Welcome to Houston. The guy pulls out his AK-47 to protect his family. He said his son and wife and newborn were inside the home with him. First mistake. He came outside where he saw two men in a Chevy Impala. One of them came up with a gun, and he said the guy tried to shoot him. So he fired his AK at the car. The gunshots then alerted two other guys who were in his backyard trying to break in the other end of the house at the same time. They came running out from behind the home, so he shot at one of them. That man jumped into the Impala, and the group took off, leaving the third guy who didn't get to the car in time there. He was... it's hysterical, but bad guys, there is no honor among thieves. At least not most of the ones I read about. And they left the third guy. He ran off, but they drove away and left him. Anyway, they took off there. He took off running. The neighbors slept through all the commotion. However, they applauded what the neighbor did to protect my family. One of them said, "My first thought would be protect the family by all means necessary," which is what he did, and he had the right. The shooter has not been identified by the investigators. They expect that it's going to turn out to be a valid shooting, and they won't drag his name through the mud and so forth. But it's just Texas. You come out with an AK. If you shot at the bad guy's fleeing car anywhere else, particularly with an AK, you would get arrested. They're going, well, it's okay. Texas has a unique state law in that they allow people to shoot in defense of their property, including running after the guy to get their property back and firing at him. You don't get sued by these guys in federal court because it's not a federal crime to do this. So Texas is really cool. I do a Texas story at least once every show. And then I have to tell you, don't do this.
I was going to say, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, obviously, in what I just described, and again, we're reading press reports here, not all the police reports, but there is no threat to the guy's life at the time the shots were fired. He kind of lamely said he was trying to shoot the tires off the car. And, you know, the cops in Houston went, great, I'll write that down, you know, and there it is. The second object lesson for listeners in this is he saw the two guys trying to break in and getting back, running for their car and getting in their car. there were two more. There are always more opponents than you can see. Don't focus on the burglar that's in your house, assuming there's nobody else around. Keep your back to the wall. Stay against the side. Keep cover, because you don't know. You get in a fight with the one guy and he's down and surrendered. Don't stand in the middle of the room, because the next guy may hit you in the back, take your gun away. Until the police are there, always assume there's somebody else who's about to jump on you. This happens a lot. This was 4 guys doing some type of a home invasion. They were armed. At least 2 of them we know were armed. One of the ones that came in the front, and one of the guys that came running out of the back. The shooter's okay. I believe in these legal things here, because it is in Houston, Texas. Yeah, they always say on TV, don't try this at home. Don't do this at home. You're gonna find some of Phil Ramos's ex-partners and Andrea in court helping you. I did mention at 7 o'clock when the radio show ends, we're going to continue on YouTube. So punch up the YouTube channel on whatever device you got, and we'll be talking then. This is a case out of Topeka, Kansas, where an individual intervened in a robbery of a sporting goods store. He was the guy told the police in his report he was at the counter buying bullets with his cousin when he heard some loud noises and some bangs. And this is in a sporting goods store. So he may well have been buying bullets, not cartridges. You know, the first thing gunnies would think is that's a wrong statement, but he may well have been buying bullets. Anyway, he looked up and they were grabbing weapons from behind the counter and off the counter, and they ran outside. He said his instincts kicked in. He followed the 3 suspects, described as white males, aged 16 or 17, after they stole several rifles and an undisclosed amount of cash. Once outside, the customer pulled his own weapon, yelled at them, dropped the gun. He yelled at them, mine is loaded, yours isn't, so drop the gun. We made eye contact for a second or two, he says, and the guy dropped the 2 guns that he had and ran. A few minutes later, the police arrested the 2 juveniles and a third female that was in the area driving them, apparently. The teenagers were booked in juveniles center for assault and attempted robbery, burglary. She was booked on conspiracy, of course. The customer who carries this gun without a concealed carry permit, this is the second thing in this story, would not have been able to do this if Governor Brownback had not signed and approved the law just 2 weeks prior that allowed constitutional carry in Kansas. So he was able to carry his gun legally and engage. They didn't ask him if he was carrying before Brownback signed the law, but the fact that there's an armed citizen there broke up the robbery. The weapons were recovered by the Topeka police because the kids started ratting each other off immediately when they, got in. The woman is older; she's probably in the most trouble of all. Kansas is now one of the 7 states that allows constitutional carry, meaning you can carry a concealed firearm without a permit from that state's government or that municipality's government. The guy's a hero. He jumped in. He figured he was safe because he believed the guns they had stolen were not loaded, and I'm sure they weren't loaded. What he didn't consider is they might have also had a loaded gun with them, or there might have been another collaborator waiting outside to cover their retreat. Turned out there wasn't. There's always risks in this kind of thing, and I don't want to diminish that the guy did a heroic thing in saving the merchandise that was stolen from the store. I don't know that you want to do this if you think through what can happen. You're there. The store obviously is calling the police right now. They're in the middle of town. This is not an isolated thing. Are these guys going anywhere, running out the door with an armful of rifles? Probably not. The police are probably going to get them. even if they're going to get away, is it worth risking your life to save the rifles? I don't want to diminish what the guy did. That was a gutsy thing to do. And you can come to my store anytime somebody runs out the door by stealing a gun, and you can chase them down and point your gun at him. That's fine. But the interesting thing is, this is another constitutional carry issue where the law just passed and it already basically solved crime, which is nice.
And possibly prevented more crimes. I mean, if
and there's a lot of downside to these kids running away with guns.
Right.
And obviously, I'm not making light of that. They're already criminals and stealing guns. Why do you steal guns?
Right.
You can steal more expensive stuff from a store that doesn't sell guns that you can sell for more money. So they apparently wanted the guns for some particular reason. You never know. I mean, they may know. I may have a follow-up on this eventually if this continues further. If the kid's mom sues the guy with the gun for threatening her children with a gun. And, impossible? No. Almost likely. I don't think it's stretching the point to say, leaving the guns out where somebody could reach across the counter and grab them, mom might say was negligence on the part of the store. Remember the Washington, D.C. shooter, the two guys who were shooting people at random out of a car trunk? The store that sold that gun, that gun was stolen from, was basically sued out of existence.
Wow.
There we had a lot of people killed with a gun that they did not keep track of. They had it. I actually went to that store after this happened. I happened to be in Washington State and after that case happened. And the same guy's there, but now the gun part is a different company and different people took over because he's running a range they had there. But he was basically sued out of business by relatives of all the people that were killed by the DC sniper. I think there were 10 or 12 people killed because they left the gun. And looking at the layout of his store, and he explained, this is, he was now upstairs where the range is, but we went downstairs where his store used to be. And he said, it was laid out the same way, but there's a rifle rack right here, and it had da-da-da-da-da. And there were assault rifles sitting basically right next to the front door, 5 feet, and the counter where the clerk was clear across the room. It was.
Did they break in and steal it? Or
no, they walked in the daytime. Went, thanks. I mean, they did a distraction thing where somebody was at the counter. The younger kid was at the counter making noise and asking about this, that, and the other thing with one or two clerks there. And the other guy took off with the gun. They didn't even know the gun was gone until the gun was recovered. And then they went, oh, look at our, oh, my God, it was here. We know what happened. Somebody must have stole it. They didn't know it was gone. And that's why jewelry stores have locking cases with bulletproof glass. They don't put the diamond rings next to the front door in a pile.
Right.
We hope. Reminder here, the gun store does offer free concealed carry permit classes. Learn about when you can and cannot shoot. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, you can pick up the class on our website, thegunstorelasvegas.com, and actually sign up online. The class is free. We just charge you for the ammunition. Kind of a community service thing because we like people that safely handle firearms. Couple more stories, and I got some legal news too we got to talk about.
Now, this is an interesting story.
Well, this one I kind of put in for you. And when I saw it, this is a local story, and we don't know any of the details. This was just carried by Fox 5 News here this week. The basics is this 79-year-old man is in jail charged with murder. He and his wife, who's a little younger, she's in her 50s or so, but they've been married 47 years. According to him and the neighbors, they've been fighting constantly, even though they've been married all this time. Since the first of the year, they've fought every day over one thing or another. there's a fight. You're yelling at each other. He said, I'm going to bed. I need a nap. I don't want to listen to you. And he goes to the bedroom. She entered the bedroom, started screaming at him, punching him with her fists. So there's a little violence there. You know, he's 78, and the pictures in the paper, he looks pretty frail. Anyway, so he pushed her out of the room and locked the door and went back to bed. Not something to do when your wife's mad at you. I can tell you, as a married guy, that's a bad thing to do. Don't shove her out the door and lock her out.
She's hitting you in the head, though.
It's just going to get worse. Anyway, sometime later, he's kind of dozing off. The wife opened the door and started spraying him with weed killer. He said then he retrieved a handgun and he shot her. The round hit her in the head. Or in the upper torso, I'm sorry. He put the gun down, called 911. Officers responded. They recovered the gun. He's booked into the jail. His wife died. He claims his wife had been arrested prior for domestic battery against him in January this year. Before we discuss this is a current case. We know nothing except his version, or rather, more specifically, what the police said he said. So I don't want to make a judgment on whether this is a valid shooting or not, because the real stuff is going to be a lot more detailed than this. The question is, and the reason I put it in, Andy, is for you, spraying somebody with weed killer, is that a threat of death or great bodily harm?
Well, I think it's a subjective standard, so it really
you need
comes
a
from
chemist.
Well, it depends on how he felt, and if he felt that he was at risk of being seriously injured or killed, and if this woman actually has a violent history, which she's claiming she does.
Apparently she does. Yeah.
And that's easy to verify with calls to service to the house. And if she's beating him up that night and she's not relenting even when he pushes her out the door. And I think even more evidence that would support his claim is the fact that she probably knew, if they were married this long, that he had a gun. And yet she still came through the door and attacked him with the only thing that she probably could find that she thought maybe would blind him or hurt him, or who knows, given the circumstances.
Yeah, who knows what she thought, but one would assume that
maybe
if it's a weed killer, that
well, I don't think
it's
you necessarily
not going to be real helpful to him.
And you don't have to necessarily meet with force. I mean, if he believed that he was in danger, then he can defend himself. That's just.
I get that.
I think it's a defensive. I'd take the case.
I have read 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 of these cases. Actively worked on 150 cases, investigating or testifying in it, and I have never heard of somebody spraying the other guy with weed killer. And then I looked it up to see if I could find any case law. And somebody asserts like death by weed killer. It's a poisoning death, and there have been some, but they poured it in the guy's cereal or something. They didn't spray him with. They got him to ingest it. And that's commonly and it's a common poison you can get.
Well, so, take him shooting her out of the equation. If she had just come at him and he was not defending himself with the weed killer, they would have arrested and charged her with assault probably with a deadly weapon, because it's such a broad.
The charge would have been assault with a deadly weapon. Yes. So that's what's going on. So,
maybe
by
even attempted murder.
That standard, he's defending himself. This is going to be fun to watch because it's going to be here locally.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, because I did this interview, you're not going to be his defense lawyer.
I probably will know his defense lawyer though. So I'll give him some pointers.
Well, tell him what I think. There's a million ways to die in naked city, or they used to say. I've never seen this type of assault where that was the weapon of choice. So
Well, maybe she grabbed it. Actually, might have thought it through more than we're thinking. I mean, maybe it's something that she could spray at him from a distance, like pepper spray or
maybe
something like
it wasn't
that.
in the house. She went out and bought it the week before. There's all
Maybe she
sorts of
had
things.
a lighter and she was going to blowtorch him.
Yeah, they can do that. We had a guy come in one day years ago for CCW class, and we always say, you got any guns or weapons? We got to have your bullets, whatever. We don't let them take their bullets and their ammunition in class. And the guy said, no, all I have is this, because I don't have a gun yet. And he opened up his briefcase, and he had a can of some type of hairspray with a lighter taped to it with duct tape, so he could.
Yeah.
You remember the James Bond movie where he killed the snake? And I said, that's illegal. And he goes, no, I just bought this at the store. It can't be illegal. I said, no, it's called an infernal device. You have built a flamethrower. Just because you bought it at Home Depot doesn't mean
and put it
it's
together.
okay. And who's going to stand there while you're striking a lighter? But anyway, he thought it was a great idea. I was a cop back then, so I took it away from him. And we disassembled it for him and gave it back to him. Quick and dirty one that was really a lot cleaner, just so you know, there are really clean shootings. This is a few days ago in Christian County, Kentucky. Just before 10 a.m. in the town of White Plains, a 54-year-old man showed up at his neighbor's house. 10:30 p.m., started pounding on the door and cursing, according to the police report from the Kentucky State Police. The 43-year-old homeowner yelled at the neighbor to leave, get off his property, and not enter his home. The enraged man, which we don't know why he was enraged, reported then broke through the front door, entered the house. The resident had, of course, recovered his gun. It's Kentucky after all. Fired one round from his pistol, hitting the intruder in the chest. He died at the scene. The investigation is underway. Perhaps the autopsy, they think, might show whether there's chemicals in his body or alcohol or whatever caused him to be so enraged. The guy and the neighbors have no idea, the people that know both parties said no, they have no idea why somebody would be that mad at this guy. An intruder came through the door. We always, in class, and I'll always tell you on these shows, verbal warnings, if at all possible. They stop statistically 95% of all attacks. 19 out of 20 run away, break off, fall down and cry. They quit attacking you when you use a verbal warning, particularly if you're alluding to a gun, where you either point the gun or you yell at the guy, don't break through my door, I've got a pistol. 95% of the time, they go away. This is why you actually have to have a pistol. He didn't go away. This became a shooting. He's the 1 out of 20 that you really have to have the gun. And alluding to it didn't work. Fortunately, he actually had one and was able to save his own life. We're getting to the end here of the radio portion of this. There's a gun show up at the Santa Fe. We're there selling our brass. Stop by and say hello if you're in the area tomorrow in the Santa Fe Hotel Casino. It's called the Western Trails Gun Show. Nice little show. Lots of stuff for sale. Lots of ammo. Lots of guns. Some other stuff I'd like to get into, but as usual, my outline's longer than my time. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Cool. Yeah. I'm going to try and get the opening a little bit shorter so I have more time to talk to you. Anyway, thank you all for listening. And we should be closing off now. We're waiting to hear from the radio in our other ear. We are gone. We think? You're gone.
We're
We're
gone.
gone.
All right.
We're still here on video, so you get to watch the changing of the guard. Mr. Ramos.
Yes, sir.
I know you wanted to be in on this. Poor guy's over there just.
Oh my God, that was hilarious. And on that old guy, the day before she was chasing him down the street with a cast iron.
Well, see, that's what I'm
Oh, I
saying.
didn't know that. But
That's a great fact. I think that's a great case.
That's a huge.
They're not gonna take that case to trial. The DA's office will do. At his age,
Did you have your own firm?
I do. Yeah.
Who do you have doing your investigative?
I am always looking for
Now,
investigators.
we're still on YouTube, guys, so watch out.
If we need somebody to say, hey, okay, what
Yeah,
does this look?
perfect.
How does this look?
I know, it's good. I like it. All right.
Except this particular case, you can't do.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh, I didn't get any of that. This is not really notes. We're just going to be
Or actually,
kind of off the cuff here.
okay.
All right, folks, I'm gonna head out.
Andrea, thank you so much.
I have a murder trial.
Yeah, she's doing a case. She's for you is on YouTube. She's got a case going live up in Wyoming. They called her in to do the defense. So good. We'll talk when you win.
Yes, absolutely.
And she'll be back in 2 weeks if you want to see her again. And like I say, her contact information is on the website if you need to get a hold of her. Thanks, dear.
Thank you.
Have a nice
Have
night.
fun.
Okay. And the radio right now, for all you YouTube guys, is running their news break and so forth. We are. I'll put this on the air next week, but one of my attorneys does research for us. His name is Stephen Smith. Sent us some information today that when the legislature rewrote some of our Nevada gun laws, which most of you are aware of, there was a mistake. They changed the ruling where what they're trying to do is outlaw carrying a paintball gun concealed. They changed some of the knife laws and things, and they wanted to add paintball guns because some guys are carrying paintball guns that are really powerful. You can pump up, and they're real weapons.
Yeah.
So they made it a felony to carry a concealed paintball gun.
And they look.
And you can't get a permit to carry concealed because it's not a firearm. We only issue permits for guns. And when they did that, the legislature wanted to leave in that carrying a concealed firearm without a permit is still a felony. And they didn't. What they did was when they added pneumatic gun and made it a Class C felony, they didn't then put in the new statute that carrying a firearm is still a felony.
Oh.
And Nevada statutes that precede this says, NRS 19317, any prohibited act is a misdemeanor when no penalty is imposed. Whenever the performance of any act is prohibited by any statute and no penalty in violation of such state is imposed, the committing act shall be considered a misdemeanor. And they didn't mention the firearm concealed weapon when they rewrote the statute. So carrying a concealed firearm right now is a misdemeanor in the state of Nevada. Was a felony a couple of weeks ago. Now it's a misdemeanor. If you do something wrong with it, of course, it's a more major crime. But it is a Class C felony to carry a paintball gun concealed. But it's only a misdemeanor to carry a gun concealed. So I'd suggest what you're going to carry concealed be a real gun. Now, we're off the air with KDON, so we're just on our regular stuff here. So this gentleman is Phil Ramos, who has been with me on many, many shows.
Yep.
We've known each other for, I can't tell you how long. I remember when you were working patrol and you came by the old survival store. You had a bunny rabbit, a kid's toy, and you're sitting on the dashboard you used when you had kids that were in distress to give them and whatever.
Right. Man, that was way back in the day.
That's way back when you were young and skinny and driving a black and white.
And handsome
and well,
all that stuff.
You're still, your hair's longer now.
Yeah, a little bit. Just a little.
Anyway, if you don't know Phil Ramos, I'm going to embarrass him a little bit. He and his partner, Jimmy Vaccaro, had the highest solve rate of any team. Homicide always works in teams. Depending on where you go in the country, there's 2 or 3 or several on a team. They had the highest solve rate, I believe, anywhere in the United States.
I don't know about the U.S., but we did pretty good here in Las
A
Vegas.
huge, something 80% or
Yeah.
something, where the
Yeah,
average
80%.
is 60%.
Yeah.
Great investigator. I often, when I talk to Phil in public, I say, Jimmy Vicari was really smart and made him look good. But the truth is, they're a couple of very smart guys and solve stuff that was like Sherlock Holmes TV shows. And I know you're working on slowly writing a book about a couple of the cases and things. And
Yeah, that's going to take some time.
Anyway, he knows what he's talking about. And why I wanted him to come on to this little, what I'm now calling Fired Up Plus. I've been reading all this stuff, and I've said several times, I used to be a bailiff and as a deputy counsel, so forth. I've never been a patrol cop, unless you count like 2 weeks in San Fernando, California, which I don't. Nor did that department. But the shootings we've had where officers were in some cases apparently grossly wrong, have caused lots of other cases to be investigated and picketed and rioted and lawsuits and officers suspended and fired. And this started with the Ferguson case, really, where the officer, as we all know, was exonerated criminally, civilly. He obviously fired his gun at this great big guy who was reaching into his car, trying to take his firearm. One of the bullets, even being a ballistics guy, one of the rounds that officer fired hit the inside of his car door. And there's blood, in there, and there's all sorts of physical evidence that there was no hands up, don't shoot crap. The officer's innocent. We still have riots. Now that we've had a mix of good and bad shootings, policemen are being targeted, murdered, sitting in their squad cars writing reports, just
on their lunch breaks having pizza.
And they are afraid. The murder rate is going up in some major cities, usually cities that had these problems.
Right.
Because the officers are afraid to do aggressive police work. What I think.
Yeah.
How do we fix this?
It's going to be a hard fix, Bob. It's going to be hard because what the trend now is, instead of having proactive police officers who are out there knocking on doors, stopping cars of bad guys that they know are problems in certain neighborhoods, they're backing off because, not that they're afraid, they don't want to go through the grief that they're going to have to go through because they're doing their job. Now it's at the point where if you stop a car that you've never stopped before, you have no idea who they are, what the occupants are doing, whatever you stop them for could very easily escalate into a huge problem. We just saw that here in Vegas just last week. Very, very minor traffic violation turned out to an officer-involved shooting. The guy pulled a gun on the officer, and there were shots exchanged, and the guy's dead. The officer got grazed in the neck. Thank God he's going to be fine. But the trend now across the U.S. is the cops are taking hang on, I'm just going to sit back and react to something instead of go into the neighborhoods where I know there's problems, follow these guys that I know are thugs and criminals and are out there capering all day long. And if they do something and somebody else calls, then I'll respond to it. The reason they're backing down or throttling it down, so to speak, is because of the trend nationwide to criticize every cop every time he does something that's either marginal or they think the public or certain socioeconomic groups say, well, the cop didn't have to do that. There should have been another thing that he could have done. And then it goes crazy. The cop gets smeared all over the place. His family gets pulled into it, and they're sitting back and waiting for something to happen before they take an aggressive posture. They're still going to do their jobs. Look, all you got to do is look at Chattanooga day before. Yes. Cops went in there in an active shooter situation and they threw themselves in front of the bullets. They're still going to do that, but it's going to take that kind of incident for them to do that. They're not going to just,
go into the neighborhoods where they know there's problems.
And go looking for problems.
Right, and go looking for problems. So the reason that you've got violent crimes jumping in the St. Louis area and the Baltimore area is because the cops are doing just that. They're sitting in their patrol cars, sitting in an intersection waiting for something to happen because they don't want to put up with what they've had to put up with, what their peers have had to put up with in the last year or so, because they're doing an aggressive job, which we as citizens want our cops to be aggressive. We want our cops to be proactive. We don't want them to sit around, sit back and wait, because what's going to happen if you're the one who's become the victim of a crime, you want the cops to be ready to come to your aid. You don't want them waiting for something to happen. You want them to be proactive in their job, and that's what's happening.
It seems to, and the crime stats seem to be bearing that out. The crime rates are way up for murder, aggravated battery, and so on.
Yeah.
And I've seen cases now, where a group will gather and they just start throwing rocks at the police, and the police don't respond.
Because they're handcuffed.
An officer gets hit in the head and he's bleeding and ends up in an ambulance, they don't immediately try to chase the perpetrator through the crowd, because everybody's going to get hurt and hit, and it's going to blow up into a riot.
Exactly.
And they don't want that to happen.
Right.
But that only emboldens the bad guys.
Yes.
Looking at the more recent one in Cincinnati, where the people just got to the point where they stopped it. I mean, they actually got in the way of the bad guys themselves and said, you can't act like this. This is just, this isn't us. This isn't the people of Cincinnati.
And the whole thing that's
I was so glad to see that somebody is, because I know what happens. They live in a neighborhood, and it's so easy to sit in this studio and write letters to the editor and say, why doesn't somebody just come forward and say, they saw Fred shoot John? Because they have to live in that neighborhood.
Exactly.
And can they go testify in court? No, because they're dead. Their kids are dead.
Retaliation.
The retaliation.
And we see that so often. We see that so often that you can tell when an agency or a certain city or a certain section of the city is their cops are not afraid, but their cops are not going to be proactive because of the grief and the trend, because of cell phones and everything else, the trend of being filmed at every minute of your shift if you come in contact with the citizenry.
Right.
That's another issue that is causing the cops to say, you can't go stop somebody from filming anymore, which, is neither here nor there. That shouldn't be an issue. Cops going to do what cops have to do, but it adds an element of unnecessary risk for both the person being contacted by the cops and the cops. Usually the person who is being contacted by the cops isn't aware that there's somebody else filming the cops action. I mean, there's kids now and criminal element in the country engaging in activity to purposely have the cops come out and confront them so that they can get this whole thing on tape and act like fools and act stupid. Yeah, they create
an incident
scenarios and bait
try
the cops.
to provoke the officer.
Exactly.
And you've seen that over and over, and the restraint the police are showing in most cases is amazing. I couldn't do it.
Well,
I'm too old and cranky now, but the problem is that now I think part of that will help with the body cams the officers are wearing, because they'll have unedited tape that nobody was able to screw with on their own computer.
Right.
And then they send it over to CNN or whoever, and they play it.
Yes.
And the tape is a lie. They left out sections. They left out the kid throwing the rock. They just show. They show the crowd, and all of a sudden, the police charge and grab somebody.
Yeah.
But they cut out the part where the kid threw the rock or threw the brick and injured an officer or tried to murder an officer.
Yeah. Now
And all you see is suddenly unprovoked, the police run across the street.
Here's the other thing.
They don't do that.
Here's the other thing that's going to happen with body cams. And, you know, I'm on the fence on body cams. But things happen so quick in a confrontation with cops, like we just saw here in Vegas with the car stop, that a camera isn't capable of recording the half-second event the way the cops saw it with their eyes, and you know, they had the time to process it. Their brain processed it faster than that camera. So there's going to be incidents from body cams that officers are wearing in a split-second decision that they got to make to shoot or don't shoot, that isn't going to be fairly represented on the body cam, because the body cam just cannot process that information, get those images the way the human eye and the brain can. So, you know, cops are going to say, yeah, I saw him pull this gun, go for his waist. I saw the handle of a gun coming out. And that may very well have happened exactly like that, but it may not show up on that video because it happened so quickly. You know, you need high-speed cameras to catch action that happens in a split second.
Yeah, like they show replays in slow motion.
Yes.
Great example, Bob. They show replays in slow motion when they call a penalty in the football game, and you look at it in slow motion and go, oh my God, the ball did or did not actually hit the ground. He had his finger under
it. The ref had it right.
That it's just like that. Yeah. And without slow-mo from 14 angles, you can't see what happened. And that is unfair to referees, obviously, and it's clearly unfair to police officers. It's a horrible thing, and this trend is just getting worse and worse and worse.
It is.
You know, I can get political here, and when the president of the United States intervenes, you know, and says, well, this could have been my daughter, it could have been my son, the dead guy in the Zimmerman case, if I had a son, he'd look like, you know.
Yeah. Well,
why in the world is the president of the United States giving opinions on local cases, but only if they involve a minority that he wants votes from?
Right. And you know,
that's the fact. And we can say that now. I couldn't say that on the radio probably, but
well, the reality is this. I mean, he can sit there and pontificate that, you know, that would have been my son, but you know, the reality is, no, it wasn't. The president did not come up through that environment. You know, the president didn't live in a ghetto. The president didn't live in the inner city. Barack Obama did not get elected president by sitting back and collecting welfare.
Yeah.
You know, he went out and did something. He earned his way through his schooling, through his education, through everything, and he earned the job. He earned the job, president of the United States. But he can't sit there and say that every person in America that looks like him needs the same opportunities that he does, because those opportunities are there. The reality is those opportunities are there. You have to be man enough to go take advantage of those opportunities.
And in his attacks on police officers, and including the case, the Baltimore case, where we've got 6 officers charged with murder, and 3 of them are black, one's a female, except they don't fit the profile. But I remember even the short time I was a cop in California, we had in our little 30-man department, we had 1 black officer. Mm-hmm. And the black gangsters hated him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because he didn't put up with their bullshit.
Right.
And it'd be a perfect opportunity for our president to be in uniform and pretend to be that black cop if everybody didn't know what he looked like, and have him drive a couple of patrol shifts in Chicago and go, now do you understand?
Well, you know that's never going to happen.
Of course it's not going to happen. He's too big a profile, and he has to take too many Secret Service guys to help.
For that matter, anybody who is criticizing the cops.
If you haven't done a ride-along and looked outwards from a black and white, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, you want to say, well, the cops should have done it differently. Well, how would you have done it if you were in that situation? And or how did you do it when you were in that situation? You can't opine or give an educated opinion on something that you have absolutely no idea what the standards and protocols are. You know, police work is evolving with society. Police work is evolving with science. Police work is evolving with the times. But the people's mindset is still the same. The mindset is still stuck in the 60s and the 70s. Yeah. And they haven't changed that. That's what has to at least evolve with society. And until that happens, you know, the cops are still going to get blasted for anything that they do by people who don't know what the cops do, except, I got stopped the other day and I was harassed because I was a certain color, because I was Hispanic, because I was Asian, because I was black. That's the only reason they stopped me. Give me that patrol car and try it.
I'm sure somewhere there's a cop who stops people because they're black.
Yeah.
I know lots and lots of cops, not nearly as many as you do, but they don't do that. You know, the guy's just looking to get his quota of tickets. No, the guy would rather be drinking coffee in Starbucks than out writing tickets. You know, he stopped you because traffic cops save more lives than anybody, because you're dangerous. And if you go that speed or drive that way or whatever, look at all the people who are getting killed on the streets of Las Vegas. And they still think when a cop pulls them over,
right? Yeah.
You know, you cannot tell what race a guy is from the back of his head in a car. Even in daytime, you can't. And if you could, what are you going to? That is just so far-fetched. It drives me.
And you know, I mean, one of the realities of police work is, you know, that going ahead of time. When you graduate from the police academy and you get into that patrol car, you know you're going to have to put up with that crap. You know that. Yeah. But you're doing that because you want to help people that can't help themselves. You know, you're going to have to put up with a certain amount of BS. You're going to have to put up with a lot of abuse. You're going to have to put up with all kinds of being belittled and berated by people that you may try. I mean, one of the biggest butt reamings I ever got when I was in patrol was from an 85-year-old grandma that I stopped for driving down the middle of the road. She was using the turn lane as a travel lane, and I was just pulling her over to say, man, you know, you can't drive on here. And she lit into me like, I mean, man, you go do what you want. I got back in my car and I wanted to go home. I mean, she was just, what are you stopping me for? I've been driving longer than you've been alive. And all I was going to do is say, man, don't drive in the middle lane. I mean, I was just like, okay, I'm going home.
But that's the fun part of police
work. That's the fun part of police work
is the people you get to meet that are just on a different planet. And you go, nobody would believe what you just said to me really happened.
Right. But, you know, police work is so different now. I still have a nephew that's on the department, and here at Las Vegas, it's just not the same job that it used to be, you know, back in the day. It's not the job that it was 10 years ago. Cops are becoming cops for different reasons. There's still good reasons, but the mentality of the new guys is a little bit more liberal than the mentality that we had, you know, back in our day. So in that way, the cops' mindset is changing with the people that they deal with, which is good, but you still have to do that job. You still have to go out there and you still have to put the bad guys in jail. You're still going to have to go out there and get yelled at by people that have no idea what you're doing. But it's just different. It's a different job now, and the cops are a little different too.
It's a different job, and the people are quicker to they attack the officers now instead of yelling at them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I can't believe the danger level that has happened in the change. I mean, it's been 30 years that I've been doing that, but the change in level of danger to the officers is huge. They are actually. Yeah, 30 years ago, I mean, I would say, well, we're putting our life on the line because of it. Not really. It's a lot more fun and a lot less danger. Mm-hmm. Now it's a lot more danger, and they are really putting their lives on the line. So do something nice for a police officer. Be courteous when he stops you.
Just wave,
No.
wave to him.
Just
Just say
smile.
hi.
Just be nice.
Because, and here's the other thing, it's in the year since 9/11, right after 9/11 for several years, everybody was like, go cops, first responders, firefighters, the cops. Yeah, we love them. We love them. We love them. That has waned. That's no longer the case anymore because people have forgotten. It's been so long since 9/11. People have forgotten what that did. And, there's a whole generation that are going, what do you mean 9/11? What happened 9/11? What was that all about?
Yeah, I've heard that. Actually heard that
Yeah.
in this story.
Yeah.
And what's 9/11? They think that's taken from the police code 911.
Right.
It's
So,
but ask them who the president is. It's
yeah,
I've watched those interviews on TV where they ask college kids, name this, and they have no idea.
Yeah.
Who was Thomas Jefferson? Wasn't he the guy on the TV show that owned the dry cleaners?
There was one late night show, one host, he'd go out on Hollywood Boulevard. He talked to a college student who was majoring in some kind of science field. And he pointed to the American flag and he says, how many stars are on that flag right there? And I swear this, she says, oh, it's moving too fast. I can't count them. The American flag.
We're running a little overtime on everybody involved in the show doing this and I'm going to shut it down now. We're not on any particular time for the length of these shows, but if you enjoyed what you saw and you found this little extra educational, we're going to do the same thing again next week with one of our other attorneys, Mike Giles. And I would, if we'll see how the response is, and I'd like to have Phil come back on and look into some of the shooting cases that we talked to. The guy has a wealth of information, and I hate to see it lost when it's available to
glad to do it, man.
Help gun owners and help everybody else. Hopefully we're doing a public service here, and this will become a big deal. I'd like it to, because we can do this for a lot less cost than we could on the Pursuit television show, which we dropped, as regular listeners know. So we'll be here, and these shows, once they go up on YouTube, which is now, they continue to stay there. So you don't have to watch the show live. It appears on YouTube as we're doing the show. So tomorrow or the next week or next month, you can look at this show and remember what Phil said. When something happens, it proves he's wrong. But don't remember when something happens, I said was wrong.
It's your show, man.
The country's in a terrible position right now. We don't have a chance to talk about the attacks recently.
Yeah.
Not really a gun issue, except that we've created more gun-free zones. One of the stories we'll talk about next week is the governor of New York, or one of those, president of New York City or whatever, has decreed that all the recruiting places now, instead of arming the
military
that are there, they move them all to army bases and get them out of shopping centers, because we're so afraid of ISIS that we got to move the targets instead of just shoot the sons of bitches.
Which defeats the purpose of recruiting.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose of being in the United States. But the gun issue is they have disarmed the military, so that's got to stop. But we'll get there. Folks, I want to thank you for listening. I'm Bob Irwin here with Fired Up. We're coming from the gun store in Las Vegas. Thanks for tuning into this show. And we'll see you next week with a new show at 6 o'clock next Saturday. Thank you, Phil. Thanks for watching.
Out.